I'm going to play the Corman poem, and I just want to give a little context here. Sid was in Kyoto, Japan for many years in a kind of self-exile, economic self-exile. He felt that he and his wife could make their way, his doing poetry. She did something of a bakery, I believe, and he helped with the bakery. And it was, you know, I guess the cost of living in Kyoto was at least in the early days inexpensive. And we brought him in by telephone when he was quite old and really not able to travel, and he read these poems, and there must have been about 40 of us in the room, or 50, and we felt the urgency of what Sid was saying to us. And it's an emotional and also kind of contextual context. Well, all context is contextual. A contextualization of the event. So this is where that recording came from. So let's play it again because it's short, and then I'll invite you, Julia, to say what you think the discussion forum people are saying about this. Here goes. Steve, you ready?
All right. It isn't for want of something to say, something to tell you, something you should know, but to detain you, keep you from going, feeling myself here as long as you are, as long as you are.
I have that poem in my head. I can't get it out of my head the way Sid read it. He died not long after that. And I think of that as Sid's parting plea that we keep reading him. But so, Julia, I turn to you. What are folks saying about that? Now that you've heard the poem again, do you want to expand on that?
Yeah. So we have this student on Twitter who writes both the Niedecker poem and the Sid Corman poem are kind of ars poetica. So maybe we could talk for a second about what that means.
Find that, please.
Yeah, so ars poetica as a kind of theory of poetry or a defense or a reason for why I write poetry. And then this user writes that Corman's address is affecting the statement of what poetry's work can be very differently. And there's some discussion on the discussion board also about how that really subtle use of punctuation or the absence of punctuation in Sid Corman's poem, you know, which we only know if we're looking at it on the page, so we're not going to hear it as much in the recording that you just played, but there's something about the omission of that punctuation that's doing another kind of work.
Nice. Dave Poplar, you can switch the subject to a different aspect of the Corman poem, but I just want you to say in Poplar-esque terms, what do you want to say about that poem? What's the last thing you want to say about that poem? What's it make you think or feel?
I like this poem because it just really screams out for the participatory nature of art in general. It just screams at you that art is something that we all do at the same time. It's not something that exists without anybody. It's something that can only exist in that interchange. I like the comparison with Niedecker, but I also think that, in a sense, the Niedecker poem, You Are My Friend, is the flip side of it, because the Sid Corman poem, to me, it seems almost anti-self-sufficient, almost like, you know, we're not all in this alone.
He's very needy. Yeah. And before we turn to Lily and another phone call, I'll just say something more about openness. Another form of openness that's going to be important later in the course is the open relationship between the writer and the reader. Right? So the reader needs to help construct meaning in that case. Corman's being very explicit about it. And that the interplay between writer and reader actually shapes the way, in a weird way, in some ways a magical way, especially in the case of Corman, who's gone, who's dead. That the shaping of the way in which Dickinson is read is in part the response, not just by critics, but by readers who are not critics and scholars. The way in which Corman either survives or doesn't survive will depend partly on 32,000 people telling other people about Sid Corman. And that's partly because Sid got to us. And if he doesn't get to us, then we can't continue the conversation about him. You can't have an open conversation if the poem has been closed off by a lack of readership. And the chapter 9.1 poets, the so-called language poets, are rather obsessed about their relationship in the way language can be open to everyone else around them. so that you get to the point where Ron Silliman, in a poem called Bart, which is a prose poem in one sentence, it's many pages, one sentence prose, and Bart is about the Bay Area rapid transit. We talked about that in the introductory video because Molly really likes that poem. And what's so great about that poem is that Ron has this Whitmanian, I don't think Ron's ever been talked about in Whitmanian terms, but has this Whitmanian compulsion to hear everything and see everything around him and get it into the poem. And that poem literally depends on the Bay Area, Oakland, Berkeley, and San Francisco, of that Labor Day, that particular Labor Day, and all the working class families who were in mass transit that day, who were saying things and going places and expecting things and holidaying, and Ron needed that to be in the poem, and without them, the poem wouldn't exist, literally. So you're going to find that the harder and weirder the poems get, the more actually open they are. And I beg you, later I'll cheerlead, but right now I beg you to stay with us to Chapter 9 to see if, in fact, that openness is a way for you to get into poetry that is otherwise difficult and off-putting,